Just like to welcome everybody to the webinar tonight, and like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. And we pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Tonight's webinar is all around the Go Sentral integration and how these two together can support you and your wellbeing programs. Just before we kick off and introduce our panelists, just a little bit of housekeeping. Throughout the webinar, we love to receive your questions. So if there is anything that you would like to ask, please feel free. I think some of the best conversations that we've had throughout the webinars have come from the questions that we've received throughout. So it's always great to get your insights, always good to hear questions and just to see your interactions throughout as well. So please feel free. You can ask those questions just through the chat and we just keep an eye on that throughout. And if you haven't already, please feel free to introduce yourselves as well. It's always really good to see just all the diverse areas that everybody's come from and the schools that you're at, and good to hear from you as well. Following the event, we do record the webinar and we will share that with you afterwards. So it's usually the next day or maybe two, depending on how quickly we can edit things and pull it all together. But yes, we do send that out, and you have free access to that to pass on to any colleagues or share with your staff as well. So please do keep an eye out for that afterwards. Near the end of the webinar, we will share a survey as well. So we'd really love to collect your feedback and hear your thoughts around the webinar. Your input really does help us to create more content like this and to make sure that it's relevant and, of course, adds value to what you're doing as well. So please do take a moment. It's only a few questions in there. And yeah, as I said, it really helps us to receive that feedback. And finally, just a thank you to everybody who is attending tonight, from panelists through to everybody who's joining us and has joined us so far, and we're still joining. We really appreciate you giving up your time to learn more and to support the wellbeing of your students and doing that outside of hours like this. So we hope that you get a lot of value out of tonight, and really appreciate you taking part. What would be great is, Steph, do you mind if I pass over to you just to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm Steph. I'm the Deputy Principal at Guildford West Public School. I've been at this school for 7 years, and I started there as the Assistant Principal Special Education, so overseeing our Special Education Support Unit. And then I moved into doing that as well as our mainstream classes. And then the last 2 years, I've been in the Deputy Principal role, with the role this year mainly focusing on wellbeing. So I have a lot to do with all of our wellbeing programs across the school, all of our students across the school K to 6 and in our support unit. I guess a little bit about our school. We're about 380 students. We have, as I said, K to 6 classes, and we have 4 multi-categorical support unit classes as well for students with additional needs. We're in Southwest Sydney, and a very diverse community, taking in lots of language and cultural backgrounds. So yeah.
Thanks for that, Steph. And if I could throw it to you to introduce yourself as well. Great.
Thanks, Colin. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. So my name's Anthony, or Ant, as many people refer to me as. I'm one of the founders of Sentral. Started out as a little hobby on the side many, many years ago, really striving to try and make lives easier for many of the schools that we were providing services to. And I think the incredible thing about what we do today is really still driven by that same fundamental mission. Is we like and our people enjoy making a difference to the lives of schools, being able to benefit that. As a parent myself now, having 2 kids, one of them currently going through school, looking at all those ways that we can try and assist people out there in schools to actually do their jobs more effectively, arm them with more information to try and benefit our children. Incredibly powerful thing to be able to do for our communities as well. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for that, and Nikki.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm Nikki Bonus, the founder of LifeSkills Group. I'm really excited to be here this evening. I could go on and on and on about our company, but we've been around, I don't say it lightly, we've been around for 15 years working in the area of student and teacher wellbeing. One of the things I'd probably say is that everything that we do is working hand in hand with our schools and ensuring that we're, really speaking to the needs of not only the teachers, the students, but also the schools. And we've built technology, but I always say that we're an education company that has built technology. I think what I might do is just pass that back over to Ant, because I think there's a really beautiful partnership about the why. Why is Sentral and why have we integrated? And I don't want to take it from you, Ant, but I think I might just pass over to see, what stood out for you, because you've been around for a long time. We have a leading SIS system in Australia, and I think it'd be really nice to hear your story.
Thanks, Nikki. Look, I think for one of the things for me, and I'm a terrible technologist, I'll often say, because for me, technology is really a means to end. The reason technology interests me is it can help us solve problems. When I first started to get an understanding and lift back the covers about what happens in schools, we saw a lot of people trying really hard to deal with lots of complex and difficult problems. And we saw the opportunity for technology to be able to help them in doing that. One of the spaces that we started doing that was in the space of student wellbeing. And in many cases, it was more around compliance. So we needed to keep records about what was happening, behavioural patterns, positive behaviour, assessment tasks that weren't completed. Not particularly exciting stuff, but what we were able to do is actually start to drive a more data-driven approach to what was happening in student wellbeing. But it didn't really help us address the core problem of what led to that behaviour. Why did that happen? And when I met Nikki, one of the things that really stood out was something we've really been craving for a long time is, how do we try and actually help people before it gets to that stage? How do we know something's not right before it goes completely off the rails? And then how do we potentially intervene in doing that? And Nikki and I really sort of hit it off in terms of that understanding of going, look, ultimately we're there trying to actually help people. We don't want to see continual patterns of behaviour or children that are struggling or they're just not learning to their potential. We want to be able to help teachers to help intervene and help those kids. But how do they know? How do they know that a child's not there? And looking at some of the work that Nikki had done, we saw the opportunity to come together and actually deliver a way to do that without creating additional workload for schools, but to give them an insight and understanding together as to what's happening in the minds of the young people. And I think it's really, really, for us, exciting in terms of, again, as a parent, I sit there and think about what's going on in my children's head half the time, and I would have no idea, but just trying to peel back the layers of the young end to understand that and really hopefully be able to, if they are crying out for help, how do we latch onto that? How do we intervene? And how do we hopefully get them back on the right path?
Yeah, and I think that, that's a really interesting thing, because we were working from the other side, Ant, and I won't talk too much because, Steph, you're the person who's actually in schools working with them constantly. But I think just the concept of how did this partnership and integration happen? And I think it's, historically, we've measured wellbeing on attendance, behaviour and academics, and they're the levers. And there's a couple of surveys that have been done anonymously throughout the year, but they were really the levers that were being pulled when we were trying to measure wellbeing. And being in that space for so long and being a company that was delivering programs, we saw this opportunity where we were looking at, but wait a minute, how do you know what programs you need? How do you know how your students are? And how are you measuring the effectiveness and efficiency and efficacy of any program that you're running? And that's sort of where we started from in terms of those points. One of the big questions, and I suppose one of our missions that's really nicely aligned, particularly with the work, the incredible work that Sentral's done around wellbeing, is, I think more so now more than ever, how do we know how our young people are and what do they need? And they're the questions that we want to ask. And beyond that, just ensuring that no child falls through the gap. I was having a really interesting conversation with a principal today, and I was saying, compliance is a trauma response. Compliance is a trauma response. And they were like, I know, but how do we know? And this is one of the things that we can also begin to dig up. But I'm not going to talk because, you and I could talk, find legs off anything. But Steph, I'm really, really excited for you to be here, particularly as you were one of the schools back in 2018 that we were working with when we had this harebrained idea that we could begin to measure student wellbeing and be more responsive. I'd love to hear, at that time, Steph, from you, from your school, from your principal and from all of your teachers, what was the need that you were looking for that wasn't being met for you currently at that time?
Sure. So 2018, I think back, we have come so far since then, actually, as a school, just in terms of what we have done to support wellbeing. Wellbeing, I think in any school, no matter which community you work at, whether it's primary, high school, any area of Sydney, special ed, not, wellbeing is a need. It's a fundamental need for all of us. So I think the gap we were trying to fill was really just what more can we do to support student wellbeing? And that LifeSkills, came in. We were already doing the in-school program. And so we saw the benefit that had with the students. And we thought, well, how can we take that into the classrooms beyond that one term that we, have that program in our school? And it was using the same terminology, using the same language that the students were familiar with, and doing it on a regular, ongoing basis through both the lessons and the weather report, the check-in. So that's kind of how it started, was, what can we do to support student wellbeing more than what we're already doing? We are a PBL school. We were implementing PBL lessons. We're still a PBL school. It was, how can we do things in conjunction with what we're already doing to really support our student wellbeing?
And with that, so what did you find, like, without the, really sort of rich real-time actionable data that you've got now, what were the limitations of how you would be observing, say, a student or a class or even a whole school?
This is pre-LifeSkills Go, or yeah. Look, it really relied on the individual teacher to be observing patterns in a student's behaviour. We then used Sentral, because we've, again, have used Sentral for years. We would use Sentral, as Ant spoke about, to write up the positive incident, negative incident, maybe something we've observed, a parent conversation. And that required me, who at the time was on class full time, to go through, look at the student, look at the behaviour, try and check in with that teacher during my break time, say, have you noticed that this child's, maybe behaving like this, or what do you think the triggers are? And it was really relying a lot on teacher judgment to make that call over what was happening for that student. I guess we always try to have student voice. That's, something we do as educators, but we didn't have that same data we have now to really see, where are the students placing themselves at? How do they feel they're feeling right now? And then as a result, what are we seeing in the playground, in the classroom, when they walk in through the gates in the morning? So yeah, we didn't have that, I guess, real-time data from the student's perspective of how they were tracking.
And I think there's something really interesting there, because you're sort of pre-Sentral and now Sentral. So I think it's a really lovely relationship, because you were actively using it. In terms of what has been the benefits for you now, again, teacher workload, there's so much happening for everyone. What's been the benefit of having LifeSkills Go integrated into Sentral that you've heard, that you've seen, that you're actioning on a daily basis?
Yeah, so basically it has changed how I do my job. So I have two screens set up on my, at my desk, and on one screen I had Sentral with all my incidents and things like that. On the other screen I had LifeSkills Go with my real-time data that was coming in through there. And then, I'd have to minimize those windows, of course, to do all my other work in the meantime. Now I pretty much have one screen that sits with, it could be sent. I might have, different tabs, but if I know a student who's at risk, for example, or there's been an incident, I just pull up their profile on Sentral. It shows me all of their data with their, incidents. And when I say incidents, it could be positive, negative. It could be a parent phone call, anything like that. And then just underneath that is our LifeSkills Go, how that student has been tracking for 7 days, 14 days, whatever I want to set it as. So it's having it all in one and just being able to view it as one page for that student. If I look at it from sort of a class or a whole school level, again, I can go in through wellbeing, looking through the attendance and the class, and sort of see how that class is tracking. So look, it's really changed how I do things. It's hugely time efficient for me, again, because we were using both systems already. So it made sense. It just makes sense to me to do it like that. So yeah, the integration has really changed how much time I spend on it and how many clicks I need to do, I guess, to find the information I want.
That sounds great. I think in terms of, time is precious and we all don't have enough of it, and anything that we can do to actually try and drive that. When you first started out with LifeSkills Go, were there any sort of moments that stand out for you in terms of insights that you were able to draw out of what happened in your school, and things that you weren't aware of that really sort of stood out and shocked you in terms of realizing that without LifeSkills Go, you wouldn't have known about those things?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. The lessons are one part of LifeSkills Go, and we have done that very strategically in our school. And that's had, I've spoken about it on other webinars, but different learnings along the way of how to sort of roll that out in the school and things I would do differently. But in terms of the weather report, yes, we absolutely did not have this data before. So as I said before, we did not have, from the student's perspective, what was happening. how they were feeling, how they were tracking at any point in time throughout the day. We didn't have a system to effectively measure, I can see this child, it's not a check-in time right now for my class, but I can see this child may need that. Here's a system I can bring that child in, or I can have an iPad set up at the front of my classroom, and use that to find out how they are and how they're feeling and maybe why they're feeling like that. So yes, no, we absolutely did not have that information before.
And if you think about the flow-on effect, so armed with that information, what sort of a difference has that made to your school in terms of how you engage with the students and their outcomes, do you think?
Yes. So for me, look, if I talk from a deputy principal level who's overseeing wellbeing, for me, it's a point of conversation. If I've noticed that child is tracking a particular way, and even if it's a positive emotion, I can see that you've been really ready to learn every day. You've come in feeling happy, energized. Wow, what a turnaround. What's changed for you? So it's used both the positive, from a positive perspective, as well as a, is there something more we could be doing to support this student's wellbeing if it's not such a positive experience for them at the moment? So how do, as a classroom teacher, has got that same element, but with, 20 or 30 children rather than 400. So throughout the day, they can monitor. And I have teachers come to me and say, oh, look, I really want to know a bit more how to unpack this. What can I do to support? Once I know, they looked at the class the other day and I think there was 28 students and only 7 were ready to learn. So, only a quarter of the class was ready to learn. Actually, it might have even been a third. I can't recall how many it was, but it was only a third of the class were ready to learn. So that to me tells me, well, what am I going to do as the teacher to now get those students ready to learn? Are they going to take in that maths lesson that I had planned? Or do I need to change the course of my teaching for just 10 or 15 minutes? And maybe I use a resource from LifeSkills Go, such as a, brain break, a quick lesson. It could have been something's happened after recess. What can I do to get my students back on track? And I heard this lovely thing the other day, and it was around, if you as a teacher are required to do something that doesn't seem, curriculum based, which LifeSkills Go is, of course, being the PDHP syllabus, but that allows students to engage in learning, then that task you did or that activity you did is in fact curriculum based, because it means by doing something and stopping for a point in time of 5-10 minutes, they then get an hour of learning. Versus that hour of learning, not actually having the students take it in, need to reteach it, potentially having behavioural needs arising in that class at that point. So yeah, it helps us shift our focus, I think, to say, hang on a minute, I need to stop and as a teacher, give them permission to stop and to say, I need to do something right now to help my students learn and help my students be in a space that they're, feeling good to be at school.
I might just jump in there because I think, so you're seeing it from a deputy view and you're getting to see the whole school, and again, we'll look at the attendance component. And I'll actually share the screen because we're talking about, and thank you, Louisa, for that question, because I will pop it up in a second because we're talking about data and we're talking about views and feeds, and I'll actually pull up Sentral in a moment so you can actually see what's happening. But in regards to how does it support you as a deputy overseeing the whole school in the morning when those roles have been submitted? How do you use your wellbeing area where you can view the whole school, and what benefits has that been? So what I'm going to do is I'll pull up where you would be as an executive, Steph, just to start off in that area, and then we'll work our way back.
Yeah, so you can see on the screen, it says here 13 of 983 students have checked in today, and 6 of those students are not ready to learn or are in a heightened state of emotion. So then I click exactly what Nikki's doing on that button, and it will tell me who are these students, what emotion are they feeling, what time is it that they've checked in, and if you're using the where did it happen function, then it's where did it happen? Is it at home? Is it something related to school, playground, friends, etc. So I look at that every morning. We have 380-ish students at our school, and any given day there could be, just depends on the day, but around the 20 or 30 student mark. What I then do is I look at those students, we ask our teachers, so because we use the roll call function where we mark our roll at the same time as we check in, it's all time stamped around anywhere between 9 and 9:20, which is when our rolls are submitted. So this is we can quickly demo this.
I feel like I'm your back person. Just bear with me 1 second. You keep talking, I'll do it.
So we mark our roles exactly, and it comes through to me on the other end saying, here's the data, these are the students that might need check-in. Then I start thinking about, okay, well, did I see anything on Sentral for that student, the day before? Could it be related to something else? Might want to do a cross-check if it's a student that doesn't normally pop up. Sometimes I see family patterns happening where it could be 2 or 3 children from the same family. It could be 2 or 3 students from the same friendship group that perhaps had a problem in the playground that morning, and then it's saying playground, playground, playground. So depending on what I'm seeing, I respond in a different way. So if it's a student that's a really, wow, I wouldn't have thought that student would be checking in like that, I'll normally go and do a quick check-in with that student, or I'll give the teacher a phone call and say, just wanted to double check, how is, student A today? If it's a group of students, it might be something that I monitor just, over the morning and see how that group of students are. I might go and do an in-person visit to the class and do a little, let's come and do a job with me, just check in how they are. Or it could just be a watch and monitor situation, and let's just see how they track over the rest of the morning when we check in again at 11:30 after recess. So that's how I guess I do it in my day. I use it to, and I'm very responsive. So it's not one size fits all every day. It just depends on who are the students, how have they checked in, what's the reason they've checked in, like that. And do I need any further follow-up for either the teacher to do or for me to do myself?
And what I might do, Steph, with your permission, is I might just jump in here and just do a quick little demonstration of what the attendance looks like, because there are lots of different ways to be able to activate the check-in. And I think you've just hit on something there that, this is the first one in the morning as part of the roll call. And you've mentioned, the check-in at 11:30, and I know your school's established quite a few check-ins, but I might just do this little one here, just as an example around what a teacher will see. And I think the really beautiful part that, Anne, I know that you've been really committed to, is we don't want to change the habit. We don't want to change what teachers are normally doing. So part of being able to have this, so the same way that you'd have your balloons, your cars, your student photos, if they're used to going up and they're used to doing their attendance on the interactive whiteboard, nothing has changed for them there. I just popped this up. So this is what we call the Foundation for Emotional Literacy. This is also, the platform has been built through not only, and I think that word check-in sometimes can get a little bit lost. This is, we want to know how they're feeling, but also there's a lot of research and evidence behind actually teaching emotional literacy. Even being able to name an emotion is in itself a form of self-regulation, and there's a whole lot of evidence and research on the back of that. But our young people can come in, they can mark off how they're feeling, and this is what we call the context. This can be turned on and off. So again, a school can customize it within their own school to be able to work within what they'd like to do. So we generally say, and I know, Steph, you might giggle at this, but we generally say early stage 1. We don't turn this on at the beginning of the year because it's just a lot. And then some learning support units, this is where you're going to giggle because I know you can speak about the learning support units. Some will turn them off, and I know you don't, Steph. I'll just do a couple more just really quickly. And the same way that a teacher will go through their normal way if they are using the interactive whiteboard, all of the clicks and all of the way that they do it. This is a role that was from today that I'd already used, but normally you'd have your green at the top, your red, and you'd continue through and you'd complete. What happens now when they are completing the role is, for our classroom teachers, and again, this is at a classroom level, classroom teachers are able to see, like Steph was talking about in the wellbeing section for the administrators and the executives, they're now able to see their own class at a glance. So they don't have to go delving through graphs or pulling out information or looking in individual profiles, and give them a really high level, how many students are ready to learn? So as you were saying, how many students are ready to learn? We know that dysregulated students can't learn. And so we want to also not only be preventative, as you were talking about, Steph, how do we know how they're arriving at school, but also are they in a state of readiness to learn? The teacher can click and get the same view, have a look at their students, the context. They might, schools, and we always say we don't want to disrupt anything that's in a school, because often getting things started, we want to make sure we're complementing. So schools might have their own morning circles or activities. There are a lot of resources that are all evidence-based, curriculum aligned and trauma informed that you can use under the Prepare for Learning if you would like to use that. But also here, there's another way that you'll see the download class logins, which is QR and passwords. So again, if you don't have camera enabled, Some of the schools in the higher years might not want the students, or the students might not yet feel comfortable going to the interactive whiteboard and marking off how they're feeling. So the teacher can mark the role manually and be calling out the names, and the young people can be checking in with their QR code or with their password. We've had to, particularly over many, many years, and we won't get into the whole technology debate, but I think there's a lot of schools that think everyone has one-on-one devices, and we work with a very large amount of schools and they don't. And we often say, you know, if you're calling 3 students, just have 3 laptops set up. If you've got 3 devices in the room, the teacher is also able to see who has checked in. So again, we just want to remove that. Did you check in? Did you not check in? And that will be updating in real time as well. Down here, one of the things that we know from the communities has been that we hear time and time and time again, that wellbeing, you know, again, we'll be looking or using that triangulation, I'm so sorry, triangulation of data from behavioural incidents, attendance. But, you know, most of the wellbeing observation is done through the eyes of a classroom teacher, you know, to be watching and changing, or, you know, interactions. There's now the ability that teachers can leave comments here against a conversation. So I might have had a conversation with Marita. She's a little bit angry this afternoon, and I can pop in here angry because she had a fight with mum or dad. All of this data is rolling up, and it's sitting beautifully in all the areas of profiles. It's also sitting in that wellbeing. So everything is also raising up and rolling forward, so that we're able to see a whole child. I think it was a beautiful comment made the other day, and deputy was saying, a minute in the morning prepares my school to teach the whole child. And I thought, wow, you know, yes, we do that time, we can glance over it, we can have a look, and we can actually begin to see who is in front of me and what do they need. The context is able to be used, and you were mentioning around PBL, Steph. You know, that class, we can begin to delve into it. There are filters here, so you can begin to pull out the needs at home, in the classroom, online, in the playground. They can all be worked, and they can begin to be using all those filters that are now in there. So you can use that and also begin to triangulate that data and look at those needs of the schools. Again, that was in that section of the wellbeing, but also I think one of the things that we've, you know, really heard a lot is also being able to have that incidental information, but now having that richer data and more meaningful and actionable data also sitting against their profiles as well. So they can delve down, you can go through days, you can have a look at habits, tracking, timestamps, and again, getting much deeper information. And I can see the chat box going absolutely off right now, and I haven't got it up because I'm sharing my screen. So I'm just going to pop that over. And I'm going to pass it over to Ant for one moment while I look at some of the lots and lots of questions that have come in. Ant, over to you.
Thanks, Nikki. Look, I think one of the things that stood out to us here, we're very conscious that, you know, one of the reasons Sentral started in the first place is trying to remove administrative burden from teachers and trying to take away from us. And we'd seen a lot of things out there trying to do check-ins for various things and understand where a child is tracking. What they were missing is that, one, they just weren't based on any research. So they were a happy face, sad face, that was it. There was nothing behind the why. There was no research in terms of understanding what was going on with those emotions and what that might mean and what the action you might need to take. And 2, they were extra effort. And so if you're thinking about your situation, Steph, where previously you were running 2 screens, 2 systems, all the handling on that, what we really saw the opportunity was to basically get 2 bits of information from one action. So the teacher gets information about what's happening on with their young people in the classroom, and the ability for the role to get marked as well, and getting the kids engaged with that as well, rather than sitting there while someone calls out the name. Much more exciting way to start the day. You're getting some great data without doing any extra work. What a fantastic win in terms of actually being able to help people without adding more workload on there. Nick, I just wonder, in terms of thinking about this interactive roles is typically more geared towards a primary school scenario. What have you seen in terms of a high school scenario? Often as people get into that high school scenario, children might be a little bit more reluctant to share how they're feeling with the broader class. What have you found works well in terms of those older year groups and children engaging?
Absolutely. So the majority of the high schools will use the QR codes. And again, when we're doing the onboarding and the setup, it will be depending on who is overseeing it. So it might be the homeroom teacher that will oversee certain sections, or it'll roll up to the wellbeing section. So some high schools actually get them to check in quite a lot throughout the day, because they're also looking for tracking habits. So the setup of it is slightly different than the actual roll call that we've got here. But I'm just trying to double dip or triple dip, actually, because there's quite a lot of questions around this. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get across all these wonderful questions that are coming in. But they can check in, and I think this is the big part. They can check in as many times a day as the school wishes. Individual students can check in, and to a couple of you that have asked questions, yes, instead of just the role, and again, this is in primary school, so this is the primary module that we've got on here. We do have a high school module that the emojis look different, the illustrations look different. We can scaffold them. But there's a beautiful button right here that can be pressed. So you've done the morning roll call, and Steph, you're probably very aware, you probably use this one. But so teachers can do another class check-in. They just press that class check-in and they can do that again. So that flexible mode, and being able to, for schools, particularly if they're in a high school module, using the QR codes, they will pick certain times of the day that they want to do that. Also for individual students, you might have students of concern or students that you're wanting to check in. We learn, and I know that Ant, you'll giggle about this one, but we learn how they're using it by listening to stories. And I heard this great story today, and I'll just hopefully, one of the beautiful features that I don't think we even recognized at the time was within the profile section. And you can probably speak a little bit to this too, Steph, in a moment. But within it, when we're looking in the profiles, so I'm just moving questions and boxes and everything around, it's all happening right now. Within those profile sections, when we're looking at a young person, there is this beautiful, Deputy drew my attention to how often they actually use this. When someone's sent to the office or they're lined up outside of the office, they don't have to worry about their QR codes or carrying their passwords. You can log in as them and get them to do a check-in in your office. So that will pop up to that student app and that student dashboard. And someone was saying to me today, this is a really regular feature that they're using. So when there've been incidents on the playground or when someone's been sent to their office, I know, Steph, you do it in lots of different ways. I'm going to stop talking because I think it's better from the horse's mouth. But I just discovered that today, and someone was raving about that feature of we don't have to worry about them carrying their QR codes. We don't have to have anything around the school. They've turned up really dysregulated. They're not ready to talk. Over to you, Steph.
Well, I just learned that feature existed too. So thanks, Nikki. I actually, no, so when I do it a bit differently. I go into the child's class. So I've got a fairly good memory, know which classes most of the kids are in. And I pull up their class and get them to check in. And this would avoid, the accidental click on the wrong child's name and things like this. So this is perfect that you've just taught me something. So I will be, as of tomorrow, doing it this way. But no, I check in with the students all the time. So kids are in my office all the time. We don't like the notion of, children line up outside the office door at our school. We just have regular conversations with them. They mostly come to us for good things when they want to show us their work or come and share something really lovely that's happened. But of course, in my role as deputy as well, there is a big focus on welfare and wellbeing. So when the child has had a really hard time, or maybe it might have even been the day before, I will just bring the child in for a quick check-in. I had, many students in my office today doing exactly that. So I use a combination, depending on the student, of the the weather report check-in. I also have, because there's so many resources on the LifeSkills Go platform, but I have in my office on a little lanyard all of the emotions cards as well. And on the back of those cards has, when you feel sad, how does it feel in your body? What can you do to help you? All of these things. And I often will talk through those with the student as well. I also, again, if I can see that student is dysregulated, will jump into the platform and actually do an activity that might suit that child. So I'll say to them, do you find a breathing exercise particularly helpful, or do you want to do a lesson? And I usually let them select what they would like to do. And they're so familiar with it that they really do know all of the things that are available to them. So teaching them not just this is how I feel, it's what can I do in that moment to help myself, get back on track, get back into a zone where I am ready to re-enter the class and take good care of myself and, your emotional and, fitness, I guess, just as we would talk about physical fitness. So yes, that's how I use it. It's multiple times throughout the day. It's using the resources in conjunction with the weather report, not just, oh, it's a shame you're feeling sad. Okay, thanks, off you go. It's really, well, now what are we going to do about that? Let's work together. Yeah, that's how I use it.
I'm having a giggle. I just have to decipher. So, Steph, when you're talking about the weather report, it's the emotion check-in. So for all of you, I'm just laughing.
Sorry.
No, don't say sorry, because when we started, it was called the weather report because it was about identifying the weather within the body, and it was about identifying our emotions. And you just make me smile because it's this beautiful, beautiful evolution of the platform and how it is now. But I just would love to address a question from Claire. So Claire, one of the things that we've done is it fits beautifully. I'd probably say 80% of our schools are zones for regulation schools, because they don't see the colours. So they don't see the state of readiness to learn. There's no colours on the front of it. Identifying the emotions still fits in. So you can speak about your red zones, your green zones, all of the work. And that's what I was saying about, there was a lot of work done over the last 4 years to make sure that the data was complementary for any of the programs that you've had in there. So that also schools that have been doing and are currently using zones of regulation, imagine being able to record every time that the young person is moving their face between the zones. And what you've got is that beautiful history, longitudinal. You can begin to track and see if any habits have changed. And as Steph was saying, you can also review that up on an executive level through the profiles and also pulling that information out. So there's just some brilliant questions coming through. And thank you, Tim. I can feel your fingers burning in the background as you're trying to respond to all of those. But just in regards to, you've mentioned quite a few times the resources. So I just want to sort of show you how you can move between the platforms. So you don't need to log into one, log out of the other. You can pull up all of those resources. You can do that from the executive level, from Wellbeing. This is at the back of the demonstration site, so please forgive me. Mine's going to look a little bit clunky compared to what yours would, Steph. But you can action from Wellbeing from here. If you do want to have those larger dashboards, you can move seamlessly between LifeSkills Go and between Sentral. Also if you're wanting to work on those filters and really begin to pull some of that data down. I think somebody previously asked a question on, can we download that? Can we work with it? Yes, you can. So all of these areas, you're able to work and triangulate that data. You're able to use those filters across the whole school. You can begin to have a look at, what areas of needed context. Is it online, on the playground? Also different emotions. That you might be wanting to do a social skills program or a friendship program. And probably a big thing that I just kind of pop in as some of these questions are coming through. What came about, and I think, Steph, it'd be really lovely to hear you again in a practical sense, why this has been important to not only you, but also your teachers. We've got that information, but also making sure that those students are raised up so that we're able to see them, if that makes sense. So we have what we call a pinned students. And this has become a really critical area when we look at the ethics of, we don't want to be in the data all day, every day looking at it. We want to make sure, and again, it's usually longitudinal. The system itself sets the 7 days. So any child within the whole school that has registered in a state of heightened emotion or, state of heightened emotion or emotional overload will be pinned to the executive dashboard. But you can also pin any student. So it might not be a student that is registering. And I think this is where that comes into, through that observational information, parents, carers calling, specialist teachers. Again, you can begin to see how have they been, timestamp, you can pin, unpin this. And this is also in the attendance under the area for your teachers as well. I'd love to hear why this was so important to you, Steph, because I know this is a really critical piece for schools.
Yes. So yeah, this again is a bit of a game changer for me because there's so many students who check in And it may not be an emotion that's a heightened state or something, but I need to monitor. So lonely was one of those. That was a child who was ongoingly checking in as lonely, but it wasn't popping up on my radar as an executive. And that's a student I wanted to monitor. I've just pinned a student this week, actually, who has had quite a lot going on in their life. And interestingly, going back over the data, they were checking in as really positive emotions, and which wasn't really correlating with what we were seeing and what was happening for that student. So a little bit around, okay, does that student either not feel comfortable to check in how they really feel, or are we not recognizing the emotion of how that student? So now I know we need to do a little bit more work with that student. So I guess what was happening prior to this function existing was I was in my head keeping a mental note of all those students who I was working with, who were coming through my office every day, who I was seeing incidents on Sentral about. And I was going, oh, I've got to check in this class today. How did that student check in? Got to check in with that class today. How did that student check in? So this just now pins. It doesn't mean I don't look at the whole school data. It doesn't mean that those students who are checking in that are automatically flagged as a pinned student don't appear. But if there are those students that I just want to keep an eye out on, even if it's, weeks after something's happened, just to keep that track with them. So yeah, this has been really, really helpful for me. As I said, I do still look at the whole school data. I do look at class level data from time to time, but this has just been, I want to quickly know how that student is. It pops up on my screen. It could be they're doing 3-4 check-ins a day. How are they tracking over the day? How are they tracking over the week, etc.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that this was a game changer for so many schools, because if I'm co-teaching, or if I'm not teaching full-time in one classroom, or I'm moving around, how do we make sure that no child falls through the gap, but we're also raising them up? The other thing is also having all of their check-ins so that you can see what's the fluctuation. So yes, we've got the graphs in their profiles, but I did come over here to show the resources, so just bear with me 1 second. So Steph, you were mentioning a lot about the resources that are in here. Included in the emotion check-in package, there's different levels of packages. So the first one is the emotion check-in, and then there's also hundreds of curriculum-aligned, evidence-based lessons, digital lessons with formative assessments. But included in there are also, you've got your emotion cards. So when we were working, a lot of what was coming up too was, how do we speak about emotions in the school? Like, we might be able to speak about a zone, but how do we begin to, have a common language? And this was a really big thing for schools too. How do we have a common language? How do we, and we're talking about keychains, they're all included in the subscription with the integration with Sentral. You can have them as posters, you can have them as keychains, they can be sent to families. And they've become a really beautiful supportive part of the platform. Also in there is exactly like what you were saying about brain breaks. They grow up with the students, so the characters are really, really young for the young ones. They get older as they go through, and then the high school. So this is my demonstration site, so you can see a little bit of the difference. So the characters get older. These are all trauma-informed and evidence-based as well. And again, there's just something that you can move in and out of Sentral to be responsive to what is happening. So not only to responsive to the data, but also they come back in from lunch and they're a little bit unsettled, or as you were saying, Steph, if there's other activities that are needed. Yes, sorry, Sarah. Yes, I'm so sorry, I'm trying to keep up with all the questions. Yes, Sarah, they can pin. We got very excited about this because this was one of our releases last term. Teachers can pin their own students, and that's been a really big game changer too, because again, we don't want people caught up in the data looking at graphs. You've got a lot to, you've got a lot of little people and a lot of young people, sorry. That same action is happening on the class level too. So you can pin those students to your own dashboard. You can also add comments there. So from your phone or however you're accessing Sentral, you're now also able to leave those wellbeing comments that also will roll up against the profiles as well. So there's a lot of information. And again, we want to make sure that we're lifting that information, that if we go right back to where we started, how do we see every student? And also what next? And I think that's a really big point too. And you mentioned about PBL, having those abilities to be able to not only see the student, measure programs longitudinally. There were quite a lot of questions. I'm so sorry. And please just repost them if I've missed them, but I'm trying really desperately to cover them all off. Longitudinally, you're also able to measure the effectiveness and efficiency of other programs. So there's a lot of, you might be running an anti-bullying program, or you might be running an anxiety program, or you might be running a social skills program. You can also, in your executive, in your stage meetings, or however you're using it, all of that data you can begin to use to track and see if it's changing. Steph, I'd love to pass it over. How are you using that through your stages, and how are you using this wellbeing data to inform your school?
Yeah, so look, I think one of the things I was just sort of thinking, and I was looking at some of the questions as well around, and just hearing what you were saying, Nikki. One of the things I think before we even get to looking at the data is using this tool. You need to make sure the students are checking in accurately, which really does involve teaching, and it requires ongoing use of the platform. So for me, a child checking in, oh yeah, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. It may not be how they actually feel. So we really every morning make, 5 minutes, that's all it takes, just to really go through, I can see your body's feeling like this. You're telling me this. So really getting to the point where the child can recognize their own emotions first, because that data is then going to be more meaningful, because otherwise it's potentially skewed data. We look at it as a stage. I work regularly with the APs of every stage to sort of highlight particular students that might be standout students to them. Again, whether that be, wow, isn't it amazing that this student has had such a positive start to the term? And I've noticed, not only have the positive incidents on Sentral correlated, but they've also correlated with what's happening in their Go check-ins. Or it may be, I've noticed there's been, 3 or 4 incidents this week, or a couple a day for this student. The data is telling me that the data is not telling me that. So I use it, and I'm, I guess, a little bit discerning with the data. We are so discerning with our academic data. We triangulate it. We have multiple sources. We don't just trust one assessment. So with this, I look at it from both the Sentral perspective, the wellbeing perspective, and I try and have the conversations with the teachers as well about what's happening for their students as that third source of data. To try and triangulate it. I'd bring that back to the executive team, or one-on-one with the stage supervisors, of course, and we come up with, well, how can we better support this student? Do we need extra resources in that room at this time? Do we need an extra wellbeing program being run? Is it a referral to our school counsellor, or our, we have occupational therapists that do a lot of social skills work with our students as well? Is it an intervention that needs to happen in the playground or before they go to the playground? Because that's what our data is showing us. So yes, absolutely, it's a tool that we are using to collate very rich wellbeing data that, in my opinion, is just as, or if not more important than the other data that we are collecting on a student very regularly. So yeah, I guess that's how we're using it. It's just, it's hard to sort of talk about it because it's so seamlessly embedded in what we do now, that I'm trying to really think about, well, what would this look like if you hadn't started with it?
And do you have any questions? I feel like I've been dominating the discussion.
So I was actually, one of the questions that's come up a few times in there was around the different levels of emotions that children ask about. And I'm just wondering, Nikki, that might be one, if you're just able to talk a little bit about how that works in the product.
Yeah, absolutely. So the scaffolding of the emotions, and thanks, Ant, like I've been trying to, with my eyes, I've been doing this all night, and please keep them coming. Like, they're really great questions. And again, we're all here to answer questions. And also, I love what you just said, Steph, that it's become quite, it's seamless. So this is just something that you do twice a day or 3 times a day.
We, at a minimum of once, we've introduced it as sort of a second one this term. And then really we've got teachers that do it after every break time. We've got teachers that adapt it just depending on the needs of their class. It might be specific students are checking in more regularly. And
what I might do is just speak to that. So the scaffolding of the emotions, when we developed this, we were working initially with Dr. Dan Siegel, and also with looking at, as a child's development, where do those emotions sit and how do they scaffold through the lifetime of a child in a school environment. So the platform, when we come off the foundation for emotional literacy, the 6 emotions, they actually it's pre-built in there for early stage 1 or foundation, and grows right with the students. They'll keep adding more emotions in, and Steph keeps referring to the weather report, and the reason being there's 2 different illustrations or 2 different interfaces now. So you can also adapt, and we do all of this in your onboarding, but you can pick which student your class might like the emojis versus the faces. And I know it seems a little bit strange, but different students in different classes will respond differently. And also you don't want to probably stay on the 6 base core emotions for a long time, although we have had schools that stay there as English as their second language, or we've got ED units or SSPs that we're working with. So you don't have to come to us. All of those settings are within there, and they're a toggle, and they're quite simple to use and how to change so that you can scaffold those emotions. They can grow year on year. There was a question around, does this data, is it longitudinal? And it's like, yes, it is. So you can pull that data out. It's really, and that's been something for planning for schools as well, that has become a really, an important piece of information to be able to pull out that student. Probably just also, and I think there's something else of touching. I feel like I'm speaking so much tonight. Normally I speak so quiet, and but it's just great questions. And I've got you, Steph. I think one of the questions that I might throw in there is, the burning question is, how do people get started, and how do you get the buy-in that you've got? Because this is something that I know that I said to you one day, so how would you be if I just turned LifeSkills Go off and we just took it away from you and you didn't have it anymore?
Yeah.
And what was your response?
I wouldn't be able to do my job anymore. So I've become so reliant on it. I think in terms of getting started, there's just one, and I'll very quickly share a story about a student, because I think it really highlights, as there's so many educators listening to this tonight, why this is important. So I had a student that he's in stage 3, and worked with him a lot last year. There was a lot of wellbeing needs. There was just a lot of behavioural needs, and he was regularly coming and checking in with me. And when he first started, he could not identify an emotion. He could not identify that in that moment how he felt a particular way. And he did the 2 or 3 times a day check-in in his class, but he would probably also do it anywhere between 2 and 3 times a day with me, depending on the day. And over time, we talked a bit more about what it looks like, how it feels in his body when he feels a certain way. Anyway, fast forward to this year, so about 6 months later of very intense work to support this student. And I came down to deal with an incident earlier this year. And his first thing he said to me was, do you have the cards with you? Because on the little ring I was just sharing before, the one Nikki put up saying calm. So I have a whole stack of them on this ring. I said, yeah, sure I do. And I showed it. And I said, I can see you're feeling angry. And he said, no, it's not that, it's another one. And then that's when he said to me, can I see the cards? And he picked frustrated. And we were able to get to that point of using that language. But I don't believe if we didn't have this consistent ongoing approach using the same language, the same visuals, every teacher working with this student in the same way, and all of our students actually in the same way, that we would have gotten to that point so quickly. So I think in terms of where would I start, it's the explicit teaching of emotions. And thankfully, with the lovely technology we have, it's very easy to do in a very seamless way with things we're already doing, like Sentral and check-ins every day. So that's where I would start.
And I think that, and I love that story, because I do, and for those of you that might not know, and I'm going to kind of just name this, Steph has worked previously in the learning support units, and we have a really, really big focus in, you've just asked a question. Yes, you can roll it out to age groups. You can also adjust even individual students within classes. You can have you might have a learning support student in a mainstream class. You can adjust them so that they're on the foundation of emotional literacy. It's really customizable, and we've had a really strong commitment not only to SSPs, but also to learning support. And that's been because of a lot of our mainstream schools, and also people like you, Steph, that have really brought that into the school and led that, so that every child should have access, and that there should be no child that should not be able to access this, and that ability to be able to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of the students. And I think I'd love to hear, and we don't get to this often, and I'm going to, only because it's you, how did you introduce it in your learning support units initially, Steph?
Yeah, so I was actually teaching on class at the time in the support unit, and I had a class of 7 students with autism, intellectual disability, obviously limited verbal language for most of those students at the time. And I introduced it slowly. I explicitly taught it. We can't just assume that a child understands what an emotion is, whether they are a child with a disability or otherwise. It's a big process to understand what that looks like for you versus what that looks like for someone else and how that feels. So we did a lot of explicit teaching around it. We utilized the check-in, I was going to say weather report, and we utilized the lessons that explicitly taught the social skills associated, or the social emotional learning aspects associated with identifying emotions, managing emotions. And I did that, I did the check-in every day, multiple times a day, but I did the lessons quite frequently as well to begin with that class. I, at the time, depending on the class I had, created some of my own activities that might have been something else I did throughout the week to support that, because it's not just I just do this lesson. There's a whole other area of how I might engage the students in that learning as well. So that's how I started it with that. It's a very systematic approach to it in any class, but again, the support unit probably just needs that little bit more exposure to it to really have the students identifying the emotions and teaching it. And I can say, I was only talking with one of our amazing support unit teachers the other day, who teaches one of our K-2 classes. And, there's students in there that, as a result of really explicit ongoing teaching, are accurately identifying emotions, even down to things like calm. So it's not just happy or sad or excited or angry. It's I'm feeling calm. And you can actually see it in that student's body when he actually says that, for example. So it's accurate. And that's what the teacher said to me. It's not just he's picking one anymore. He's really thinking about it before he does it. But that comes with, commitment to supporting the student's well-being in that way and teaching those emotions.
Oh, I think Christine said it so beautifully. You do, and you make it so seamless, and because we are in awe of you, the way that it's delivered, the way it's embedded, the way that you're using it. And I just think you're just doing a phenomenal job. And yet again, we have run out of time, and we do not want to go to resentment time. So I'm just going to share something, because I often say that it's like sitting in a fire pit. We're having these conversations, and I just want to say huge, thank you for the engagement of everyone there. But I suppose one of the things that I'd love to do is, just share the what next. And I'm probably just going to pop this up as I clunkily do this, because I, just feeling very clunky. But one of the things Sentral's done really beautifully is, and I'm just going to pass it over to you, Ant, right now.
Thanks, Nikki. I think one of the beautiful things about this is that I think it's such an amazing concept, but then how do we make it really easy to get started with this? Actually see the benefits for yourselves in your school with your children in the classroom there. So what we've rolled out is there's a new LifeSkills Go option available within the Wellbeing menu in Sentral. That should be available for most schools already. There may be some of you that will be coming later this week, but it will appear under that menu there. When you go into it, it gives you, if you've got administrator rights to Sentral, the ability to go through and actually provision a trial to actually try the LifeSkills Go product. And so all you've got to do is jump in there, click on the provision button. It will go through and just consent that we are allowed to share data with LifeSkills Go, and make sure let you know that we'll be sharing your list of student names with them. And then it'll go through and provision that account and actually get it all set up behind the scenes, ready to go for you. After that, you'll be taken to an introductory page that just gives you a little bit more information about the product, what it does, how it works. And at that point there, you're pretty much ready to get started and actually start taking those check-ins and just start to see what it is and what it's all about, and just start to discover what it might teach you about your own school there.
Yeah, and I might just jump in there too. So you're not off and running. There are a lot of resources once you provision that. There's a video on how to get started. There's also, you can jump in for some onboarding. There's a whole lot of support, and also the resources that we said, we email those out to you. So you've got the beautiful resources, the cards, and knowing how to use them, some suggestions. But I think that, congratulations, really beautiful way to get started, get straight into the platform. It's not like you have to wait weeks to be able to start using it. You can start using it once that starts coming through. And there is a lot of support on how to use it. There is a cost involved, Claire, so we'd love to give it to you for free. Hopefully one day someone will fund it for every single child in Australia. That would be really, really lovely. That would be our prayer. So anyone on this call, if they've got deep pockets and would like to ensure that every school has this, that would be really lovely. But there is a cost involved. And again, we're really happy, Sentral is really happy to speak to you about the different licensing options. Again, it's quite minimal, and also that ongoing support. So there is user supports, there's lots of wellbeing lots of wellbeing webinars like this, and also people like you, Steph. I just want to say thank you, because it's one thing to listen to us talk about, Ant and I could talk about why we think this is brilliant. But I think hearing it from yourself, Steph, from your teachers, from your students, and also like-minded schools, or schools like you, so if you're rural, remote, small, big, we run lots and lots of webinars regularly with people just like Steph, who can share what's worked, what hasn't worked, and also those user groups. And I know that you're very much going to, bye-bye, Jenny, have a beautiful evening. But I think one of the things is this is just the beginning. We're always taking feedback on what the next steps are. And I think that's the really important part. We talk about this as being, there was a webinar the other evening on why we need this webinar, and that's up on our website. You're more than welcome to go and jump in there. But it's schools that are putting their hand up and saying, hey, or, one of us or the product managers walking in, and one day I walked in and saw Steph's 2 screens, her Sentral and the other one. And she's like, Nick, this needs to be in here. Like, this needs to be in here. This needs to live. And literally said to me, please make this happen. This is double handling. And I think if it's okay with you, Steph, I'll share the split screens that the teachers use. Is it okay? Yeah. So she said to me, I go down in the morning and I look in my classrooms and they've got a split screen. They've got LifeSkills go on one side and they've got the attendance on the roll call on the other. How can we make sure this is all living in one place? And the system that we're on all the time is Sentral, and we want to be able to access that, leave notes, pull that information out. And I think that part of what we're doing right now is we have an event that's starting, which is called National Check-in Week. And it's something that we pride ourselves at LifeSkills Group, and also with Sentral. We'll be running like National Check-in Week starts, and I think, there we go. Starts on the 22nd of May. It's an amazing event because during this event, we have free professional learning. We're all coming together and we're getting a snapshot of how our young people are. Got some incredible ambassadors. We also, as an organisation, run a lot of professional learning. During the week, there's free professional learning, there's webinars, there's opportunities for you to come in and learn more about the evidence and science behind, emotional literacy, self-regulation, the programs that we'd normally run in there, but also to be involved in a national event. So during that period of time, LifeSkills Go is completely integrated for free into Sentral for that period of time. So you can use it, try it, listen to other people, and also be part of raising the awareness of how are our young people and what do we need to do next. And I think we'd love you to join in. And I'll just pass back over to you, Anne. I'm sure that I've missed a million things because I've just been so engaged with you, Steph, and also Anne, and also all of you that have contributed and popped up questions. So just please, if I've forgotten anything, Anne, please let me know.
No, look, I think for us too, the idea of National Check-in Week is a fantastic initiative to support as well, because it just means nothing speaks louder than actually trying something for yourself and getting the opportunity to try it, no commitment, and actually just see what you actually learn out of it. And so we're really excited to be able to do this together as something that we can actually do, that even if that's all people do, it starts the conversation, it gets them used to talking about emotions in the classroom and gets them actually talking about, or how are you feeling with the students in the classroom. And I think that, if nothing else, is an incredibly valuable thing to take away and for people to take from this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a privilege to be able to work on it together.
No, there's quite a few questions still coming in. Sorry, I'm just trying to get to them. Yes. In Sentral without using LifeSkills. Yeah, absolutely. So you don't have to, that's why we haven't gone into the lessons and unpacking all the lessons. So the way that the emotion check-in, you can just use a check-in, all the data, all the way that is, or you do not have to have our curriculum. As I said to you, that's completely an optional extra later on. A lot of schools, we don't want to remove what you've already got. So this data and this wellbeing data, you can use just the check-in tool, Simone. The other thing is, I just wanted to call out, there was a really beautiful Claire McDonald. I just want to say, absolutely, it's time that we also normalize emotions and that we get really comfortable with being able to talk. I think right now, not only for students, but I know a lot of teachers too, they've started normalizing and modeling how they're feeling in front of students. And we know that emotions come and go, that shame around feeling angry or frustrated. The more we normalize it and the more we also begin to have those conversations where we can be happy, we can be sad, we can be frustrated, But not only are we being able to recognise them within ourselves, by developing those skills within ourselves, we can recognise them within other people. And that gives those students that opportunity not only to begin to improve their social skills, but develop empathy and compassion and all those things that we all know that we want to develop within students. I just want to say a huge big thank you to you, Steph, specifically. No offense, Ant or Colin. But I just want to say that, your commitment and your drive and the way that you've led your community and, bringing in new staff, they're on board, they're instantly in, it's become part of the fabric that it's not even, it's just something that you do at Guildford West, has been phenomenal. And I think something that, we can all learn from. And I just want to say thank you for being here, particularly of what is every day as big days right now. They're really, really big days. And thank you for sharing your time and your experience. And just on behalf of LifeSkills Group, and I'll speak on behalf of you, Ant, because I'm just blabbing it on the Sentral. I just want to say, well, you were one of our first pilot schools. So, it's a really, you spend a lot of time, no, this goes here. No, this is where this goes. No, this is where, this is our habit. This is what our executives use. This is what our teachers use. This is when someone's picking up the phone to, make a call about attendance. None of this would be possible without people like you and schools like you, your school, that have really opened their doors up to go, hey, help us, please. We want to be able to see every student and take care of every student.
Thanks, Nikki, and thanks obviously to you and to Ant for such great technology platforms as well for us to use. But I think just, in that very quickly, just acknowledging the work of our staff at our school and the commitment from all of them as well. So I'm one person, and it wouldn't happen if it was just me. It's every teacher, every SLSO, principal, every executive. So yeah, thank you to all of them as well, and to you guys for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I just want to thank Colin and all of our staff. I can see everyone's typing away and trying to answer questions in the background. Please jump in. As we said, it's in Sentral. When you click on LifeSkills Go under Wellbeing, you'll be able to activate your National Check-in Week. You've got your free access to everything that we've been speaking about in terms of the emotion check-in tool. And also just a huge big thank you to everyone who took a risk and helped us get there and build things that can also help so that we can see our young people. So I'll pass it back over to you, Ant.
No, look, thank you. And again, Steph, I think that's just so powerful for me is hearing those stories about the impact and difference. The reason we're all here and why we do what we do is to try and support people like yourselves and the staff in your school. And thank you for reminding us of why it is that we're here and why we do what we do.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Have a beautiful, beautiful evening. And thank you so much, Colin, for forever being our MC, making sure that everything works and pulls everything together and does all the magic behind the scenes, and to also all of the rest of the team from Sentral and LifeSkills Go that can make this happen. If you do get an opportunity to fill out that survey form, just letting us know what else you want to hear. What's important to you? How can we support your communities? So have a beautiful, beautiful evening, and I hope you have some wonderful rest and have a magic day tomorrow. Thank you.